our educational system is in crisis, and we need to approach it as a national security issue. There's potential there for us to do great stuff, but until we acknowledge the gaps.
Hello guys, welcome to another exciting episode of the Let's Talk Education Africa podcast. I'm extremely excited about the discussion I'm about to have today. Daniel, thank you so much for hopping on the Let's Talk Education Africa podcast. So let's get in. Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Kwame. It's a privilege to be on here. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to your listeners, wherever they may be. And I'm happy to be here and to share my story. By way of introduction, my name is Daniel Dotse. I'm one of the founders and also the chief executive of Lead for Ghana. Ghanaian by nationality. I also see myself as a global citizen and a sound advocate for pan-Africanism because I love this continent a lot. A little bit about my background, educational background. Well, if I have to start from secondary school, Achimota School, then from there I went to Arcadia University in Pennsylvania, USA, where I majored in chemistry, physics, and economics. And then from there, I went on to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, where I majored in biomedical engineering. And after that, I worked in a pharmaceutical company in New York for a couple of years, and I decided that I wanted to move back to the continent to help build a much more wealthy, influential, and innovative continent for the next generation. I think that kind of like channels back into the work that I do with Lead for Ghana, which I believe you would ask me questions about later. But that's the brief introduction about who I am and my little background.
Interesting. I'm hearing different parts to you, i.e. what it is that you studied in school, all the way to, working in a pharmaceutical company. And then now you are channeling, if you like, that knowledge, that experience to education. I'll get into that in just a sec. But there's this saying that to understand the man, you need to go back and understand his context, right? Where he grew up and some of the influences that have, in a sense, shaped who he is today. Could you share context in your childhood, right, growing up, that has greatly influenced the path that you are on today?
My dad was one of those individuals that Kwame Nkrumah back in those days, if you know the history of Ghana, decided to take out some of the brightest students to leave the country and go and learn what is happening around the globe so that they can come back and help build a better Ghana for everybody. So my dad ended up in Moscow, went to Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow, came back. And when he came back, his mandate was to go to the northern part of the country to help develop the agricultural sector more broadly for northern Ghana. And as a young man with a young family, by default, he took his kids with him. So ended up in the northern region when I was relatively young. And luckily for me, I come from a middle class family, which means my parents had the financial means to take me to any school that they wanted to take me to. And my parents were also very big on education. So they were looking for schools to place us in. Chance on a school called St. Gabriel's, which at that time was the best school in the northern region. So my brother and I ended up at St. Gabriel's, which was quite interesting and quite eye-opening. However, our classrooms were very large. I mean, you're talking about 80 students in the classroom. Teachers barely showed up, weren't given much of the homework to do, textbooks were a problem and so forth. So if this was to be the best school in the northern part of the country at that point, you can imagine what was happening in the other schools who were not as endowed as St. Gabriel's. At some point, my mom thought, look, if my kids were going to get the best possible education, they probably have to move back to the southern part of the country, which is Accra. So we moved from Accra, from the northern region, came back to Accra. At that point, put us in a private school system, which was like day and night. Teachers showed up on time. were given too many homeworks, classrooms were decorated. It was just a different educational system. And at a very young age, I could tell that my geographical location was affecting the kind of education I was receiving, because I had colleagues in the northern region who were incredibly very smart individuals, way smarter than me in a certain sense. But I just thought, oh my God, they just don't have parents who can young them from one geographical area into another geographical area that would change the entire academic trajectory. So I noticed I was lucky by just being able to shift spaces. So from there, I went to Motor School, ended up in the US, studied and so forth. But this memory kind of like stuck with me, how geographical location affects education, and how socioeconomic backgrounds also affects education. So I think it's those two things, and my personal story of knowing people that I believe were smarter than me in classrooms, but did not necessarily get the same opportunities as me. It's what became the fundamental driving force for me for Ghana, which was, how do we help build a country where it doesn't matter where you are located, whether you're located in the northern part, the eastern part, Navrongo, anywhere, OT region, it doesn't matter. Once you walk into a classroom, you should receive the best possible education, so that your parents, you don't need to shift where you live to have the best possible education. So that's how my personal background, my childhood has really informed how Lead for Ghana is operating today.
Interesting. And very quickly, your pan-Africanist ideals. So, I mean, you've mentioned, I see you've touched a bit on your father's, how brilliant he was and how he was taking, all the way to Moscow, etc. Could you expand on that, that pan-Africanist ideal that you have? Could you expand on that story a bit and that influence?
Yeah, I mean, I love history. It's one of the things, I just love history. I like to know, where we come from as a people, because I believe that if you understand where you come from, it gives you a little bit of insight of who you are and kind of boosts your confidence and what you can achieve and so forth. So I just love history, and I read a lot of Ghanaian history books and also a bit of African history as well. Of course, I also love Kwame Nyatuame and what he stood for and what he was trying to do for the African continent, and also just hearing about people like Patrice Lumumba and that whole generation. But I think for me, reading those books as a young person, those were very theoretical. It was when I got to the United States of America that I understood that when you're outside of Africa, you're just another black man. Like, anyone that sees you is not necessarily seeing you as Ghanaian or whatsoever. You're just another black man. And the concept of being black was it was a learning moment for me, because when I had never left the country before, the way I understood blackness was very different. I mean, I live in a country where majority of people are black, so it doesn't really occur to you. But once you are young out of this continent and placed in that environment, I think there's a whole lot of psychological safety, and there's a whole lot of nuances of what it means to be black and what it means to be African. And to be quite direct, I think, I think it's not a secret that most of the time the rest of the world looks down on Africa. So going through the American education system and going through the American corporate system as well, I faced multiple levels of what I would say, just outright racism and unfair treatment. So in my mid-20s, I just said to myself, I said, look, on a global stage, when you look at countries like China, India, and stuff like that, I mean, these countries are literally moving in a direction which is beginning to make them superpowers or, global powers. And by default, and because of that, the citizens of these countries, when they're outside of their country, the way the globe treats them, it's quite different, because it's almost like where you come from also determines how people are going to be receptive to you. So my whole mindset kind of shifted and said, look, for Black people and for Africans to be treated with more dignity and receive a different kind of experience in this world we live, Africa as a continent needs to do extremely well for itself, we need to look inward and say, like, what are the systems that we can build and fix for ourselves and be in total control of our lives and how people treat us. And by default, that will also change perceptions about what people think think of us. So 2 years after that, that's when I moved back to the continent to start Meet for Ghana, with the whole idea that Meet for Ghana becomes almost like the litmus test. If it can succeed here, then by default, it can succeed in other parts of Africa, in other parts of the continent, right? So, because most of the time, people just need to see what's possible. Once they see what is possible, that's it. You've created a pathway, and that pathway kind of causes a ripple effect that kind of transcends across all environment, and in this case, transcends across Africa. So, in brief, I mean, that's my pan-Africanism story, or how this is the passion I have for Africa and how that's informing what I'm doing today.
You're sharing some some really interesting insights that I'll probably touch on. So, I mean, I'm listening to you, and I'm listening to, when you started narrating the story of the context, that particular context that influenced the path that you are on, and how it looked as if being in a different geographical space in Ghana provided more opportunities than in another space. And then you going out of the continent, and then also realizing that, being a certain particular color, you were treated differently, and certain, opportunities were probably not open to you as much as your whites or different other races, your counterparts with other colors. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting, and I'm seeing how it's influenced you as a person to in a sense change direction, because I'm not sure that was your initial thoughts when you left the country.
Interesting. It's so my pathway. The reason I studied biomedical engineering and so forth, it's because my life goal ultimately was to build, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, but it has to be made in Africa. I mean, the scientists have to be African, it has to be an African-led organization. And I wanted it to be as impactful and as major as, Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca, you name them, the major pharmaceutical companies. Because I had a fear that healthcare itself is it's a national security issue, but it's also a continental security issue. Right? I had a fear that a day will come where Africa will be found wanting if we don't have the capacity to produce our own medication, our own vaccines to help save the continent. And that fear actually came to be, because the moment COVID happened, right, it was like, oh my God. I mean, this is exactly what I thought. If something like this should happen, Africa will be found wanting, and we were found wanting in the sense that the vaccines were not produced here, and we had to go out there and literally beg countries, to even purchase the vaccines, and they were hoarding this, right? For some reason, I feel like we're just lucky that the death rates and stuff did not affect the continent that much as it affected, other parts of the world. But, it kind of dawned on me and said, oh my God, look, if we had our own pharmaceutical companies, we had our own control over how we make vaccines, produce drugs, and so forth, this shouldn't happen again. But going back, when I decided to leave the US to come back home to kind of help build a pharmaceutical company, I also knew what it takes to build a pharmaceutical company by working for one and being in that system. First of all, it's capital intensive. Two, you need incredible talent. And that talent can only come from your universities. It can only come from your educational systems. And when I looked at the Ghana educational landscape, I'm like, no. First of all, we are not producing enough biomedical engineers or chemical engineers or biotechnologists at a critical mass and most importantly, at a very high quality level, that would enable you to build a company and depend on those individuals to be, the talent force for that particular company. So when I realized, I was okay, fine. Look, we're going to put this pharmaceutical dream on the table. We'll come back to it, but there is something much more dire and much more pressing that needs to be solved, which is education. So that shifted my entire energy, my resources, and so look, let's understand the educational system in this country as much as possible, and let's figure out, well, how do we help build a very robust educational system that can generate, the workforce that we need, that will feed into these pharmaceutical companies and so forth. And even if I don't end up building a pharmaceutical company, maybe I'll have done something in the educational system that would inspire somebody else to build those pharmaceutical companies and build those tech companies for the next generation. So to answer your question, yes, going to America wasn't to go to America and come back home and build an educational company or build for Ghana. It was not in the card. It was not the plan at all. But again, it comes down from my personal experience, my insights from engaging with the people and trying to understand the way the world operates. And that is what has informed the pathways that I'm taking and how I spend my time and what I put my energy and resources into.
This tapestry called life and the different threads that come together to influence the decisions and the choices that we make, it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. I mean, your take on the educational systems is a nice segue into the question I want to ask. So, what's your general take of education in Ghana?
Over the past decade, over the past 10 years, I would say I've been quite fortunate enough to have traveled to a few countries across the world, and also had the opportunity to visit classrooms whilst I'm in these countries. And the reason I do this is because I strongly believe that if you walk into a classroom, whatever is happening within the classroom of any country will tell you where the country is going to be in the next 25 years. Literally, it will just tell you, right? And when I compare classrooms that I've seen in, I don't know, whether it's Lebanon, the United States, Bulgaria, Kenya, Rwanda, Nigeria, coming back to Ghana and stuff like that, I come to realize that Ghanaian children are very smart. They're incredibly smart, very obedient. It doesn't take much to manage them in classrooms and so forth. However, to answer our question around what do I think about education system, I think our educational system is in crisis, and we need to approach it as a national security issue. There's potential there for us to do great stuff, but until we acknowledge the gaps and literally become very intentional about finding the best brains and giving them the necessary resources to close those gaps, the gap is just going to keep widening and widening and widening. And the reason I say this is because at least I also find myself to be in a very unique space where we deal with young people, individuals that are coming out of university right away. And we also deal with children who are in the classroom. And we also deal with young people who are working within the workspace. So we have a surface area engagement with these three entities. And these three entities just gives us information about where the country is going. So I could tell you the quality of graduates that are coming out of these universities year on and year on because of the sheer number of people that apply to lead for Ghana and the applications that they present and the interviews that they get. And you can tell from the interviews and the application that, okay, is the quality of graduates decreasing or is it increasing? Right now I can tell it's not increasing, it's actually decreasing. And that worries me, right? At the same time, we also get application from young adults, that people who are already working in the system, either working at banks or working for other corporate environment or working for the government, also apply to Lead for Ghana. So I could also tell, what kind of experiences are these people getting from the workforce, and what is the quality that is being churned out as well. And it's kind of like stagnant. It's not necessarily moving up, but it's just kind of like tapered at a certain level. And then we look at the classroom. The classrooms, there are more children in school today, which is amazing, right? Because you want to keep those kids in the classroom. However, the question is, are they learning? They are not. About 40% of the kids are not learning mathematics. About 35% of them are not learning English. So what happens is you have a child at the JHS level who cannot either spell their names or read a paragraph with confidence or with understanding. That tells you, what did this child go through from class 1 all the way to class 6, that by JHS 1, they cannot read a paragraph, right? So this is what I mean by this. We should treat it as a national security issue, because people are walking through the educational system thinking they're educated, but they are not. And when you do that, you create a young population that feels entitled, because to them is, I have a degree, and by having a degree, my degree should give me X, Y, and Z. And some corporations are also not hiring them because it's, look, I see the degree, but your education does not match the requirements that I'm looking for in my workforce. So what does that do? It increases unemployment. And once unemployment increases, everything else increases. Crime, the delinquencies and everything in society begins to increase. So I guess that is my general take on the education system as it stands today. However, I also believe there's so much potential, and there's so much that we can do to change this trajectory, because there are some people within the educational system who are incredibly smart people and trying to do the best they can to make this country move forward.
It's quite a dark picture you've painted, and as I was listening to you, two quotes came to mind. One from Martin Luther King, where he says that the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. And then another one by Dr. Feynman that says, schools must not practice ideological indoctrination. They should promote creative thinking, innovation, and problem solving. The students should be made to think, doubt, and question what they learn, and not memorize things under academic pressure. I think it ties rather smoothly, unfortunately, into the picture that you've painted about our educational system. I mean, especially now, but I mean, it's been going on for quite a while. What is the problem?
What is the problem?
Could you sum it up briefly? You've touched on it a bit, but what really is the problem? Because it looks like we are going into a ditch.
Before I tell you the problem, I mean, just a quote I want to add to the quotes that you shared, and also give you an idea of, I've painted a dark picture, but there's a bright picture as well, which is the optimistic part of everything that I want to share. Einstein said something which is quite interesting. It's like, education is what is left when one has forgotten what one was taught. And if you reflect on that statement really well, I think it applies to us a lot in the context of, true and poor pass and forget everything that is taught in school. You literally forget about it. But the true essence of education is, once you've forgotten everything that you've taught in school, how are you able to navigate yourself through life? So if you're truly educated, you may forget what osmosis is, or what diffusion is, or what the flow rate is, or what's the quantity of blood in a human being, but you have something that is able to help you identify what the opportunities and threats are, and also give you the emotional intelligence to be able to navigate through life. If you have that, that's the essence of education itself. And in saying that, in one word, the problem is leadership. That's it. That's the problem with education in Ghana is leadership. That's what it comes down to. The optimistic end here is we've also come across incredible young people, individuals that have shifted school systems within 2 years. Like, you will be amazed. There's a school in the Volta region where for 7 or 8 years, nobody had qualified to get into senior secondary school. Like, literally, they go to GHS, they all end up in the farms with their parents and so forth. So within that community, the community members themselves have lost faith in the educational system. And it makes sense. If you're a father and you took your first child to school, you paid school fees, and you feel like, okay, nothing really came out of this person, they ended up back in my farm with me, you took the second child to school, the same thing. Would you take your third child to school and invest money in them? No, you put them straight to the farm. It's a logical thing that any logical human being will do. So you can't blame them for not wanting to take some of the kids to school. But what we tend to do in this country is we kind of blame the parents. Oh, they don't take their children to school, they're not invested. But you have to remember, they've invested before. The investment did not yield any returns. No person, no investor invests in something that doesn't bring them returns, right? Anyway, we put 2 young people from the Youth Ghana Fellowship within this school. Within those 2 years, that JHS had about 45 students. All of them qualified to get into secondary school. And this school also became the #1 school in that particular district. That is where I knew that, oh my God, what Youth Ghana is doing is incredible. I mean, the return on investment is fast, it's quick, and it's tangible. So why don't we identify these young people, these game changers in the country? Like, why don't we put so much effort in finding these young individuals and literally placing them across educational systems in the country so that they can replicate this level of success that we see? The question is, what did they do differently? They show up to school on time. They understood their students. And when I say understood their students, I mean they went to the homes of their students to understand who their parents are. What work does the parents do? How many siblings do these students have? When they get back home, what are the challenges that they go through? What are the challenges that they go through before they get to the classroom? And when you understand your students and your children that you're teaching, the way you teach them, your lesson plan, everything shifts. Because then now you are planning around the child, not just planning arbitrarily, right? So if you have a child that needs to walk 45 minutes to get to school, you know that by the time the child gets to school, they're incredibly tired. And if they're tired, they can't really absorb knowledge as much as possible. So as a teacher, you're not going to lash that child for coming to school late. You will praise that child for making it to school. You see the shift here? Mm-hmm. And by doing so, you're also increasing attendance because the students are coming to school knowing that I have a teacher that cares about me. The parents at home is also pushing their child to go to school. Why? Because they have a teacher that cares about their child as well. That helps with academic achievement. It makes the children even want to learn more because they know that someone is invested in them. The other thing is also school leadership. How did these young people get the school leadership to think differently? It's like, okay, we have chalkboards in our school. When we're writing on the chalk, it creates dust, XYZ, and it's not good for the school. You know what? We're going to put together a small grant proposal. We will leverage the networks of Youth Ghana and their corporate partners, and you're going to change all the blackboards into white marker boards. By doing so, you've kind of brought the head teacher into the frame of solution for the school. Once you do that, you're bringing the existing teachers on board as well, right? So now your classroom start looking like every other classroom in that school system. If you're a teacher and you're teaching and you begin with a starter activity, like maybe you sing a song or you recite a chant or anything just to ginger the kids, right? It makes them excited to learn and grasp their attention. You're able to do that. And then you also get kids interacting with each other, setting their own classroom rules and so forth. What the fellows did was then you invite an existing teacher, we call the regular teachers, the GES teacher, to come into the classroom and observe what you're doing in the classroom, but not to observe necessarily so that it comes across as if you are telling them what to do, but to observe and critique you. That's humility. right? And then, because by the time when they get into your classroom and they're watching all this, inadvertently, they are soaking in knowledge. They're learning from you, right? And then you also tell them, you know what, now that you've been in my classroom, I want to come to your classroom and observe your classroom, but this time so that I can learn from you. So the teacher doesn't feel intimidated or doesn't feel like, okay, you're not coming to my classroom, come and tell me what to do. You're here to actually learn from me. And by sitting in that classroom and watching and learning from them, it gives you the opportunity to also give feedback to them. So that's how the transfer of knowledge happens from classroom to classroom to classroom. So by the time you're done in year 1, year 2, you start realizing that the classrooms that you were in, within the school, they start looking the same. And it literally helps academic achievement. So you move a school from, performing, let's say, at the bottom all the way to the top. Because your strategies have shifted. The way you're engaging with these teachers has shifted. You're bringing in parents to be involved, and you're also motivating the student to understand the importance of education. And you're also not chastising the student for making an effort to be in the classroom. So these are the positive things that we are seeing in the system, and they're scalable. And that's what gives me hope. It gives me so much hope that you have young individuals who are willing to move into communities that they don't understand the language, that they don't come from, but they understand that those communities are also part of the national fabric of Ghana. And they are willing to do whatever it takes to see those students succeed. And that is the Ghana of tomorrow. And that's the Ghana that gives me so much hope and optimism.
And you were able to do this in 2 years.
Yeah.
That's remarkable, because I see how there are a lot of there are so many areas you need to take into consideration. Taking into consideration the normal teacher, that's the GS staff, the headmaster, getting the children on board, getting the parents on board. That's really remarkable, incredibly remarkable. But just to be sure, you're even with the picture that you painted, you're speaking specifically to public schools, correct?
I mean, this cuts across, but I think public schools are the largest number of schools we have in terms of numbers. That's where they are, and also in terms of the demographic that we want to set, which is children coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds. Yes, majority of them are in the public schools, so that is where the concentration is, and that's where the focus is. But you do see some of these challenges in low-cost private schools as well. You do see this a lot in low-cost private schools as well.
The Lead for Ghana story. Tell us where Lead for Ghana came from. Even the name, its mission. Yeah, tell us. Just get into that for us.
The Lead for Ghana story. Well, first of all, Lead for Ghana is an education social enterprise. At the core of what we do is leadership development. Leadership development for all sectors. We have a very strong conviction that education is the most powerful solution to all societal problems. And what that means is once we solve education, we believe everything else will be solved. Whatever is related to national security, whatever is related to the economics of this country, whatever is related to technology, making the country more innovative and reducing crime and so forth. So you can think of us as a bunch of individuals, a bunch of solution-driven people who believe that instead of moving into the Ministry of Finance to go and solve financial issues, we want to move into the educational sector, solve the education sector problem, and by default that would translate into positive outcomes for all other sectors in the country. Our theory of change is that we want to develop the next generation of leaders to be quite aware of the challenges that exist within the educational system, but also to provide them with the tools and resources that they need so that when they move into leadership positions, when they become ministers of state, CEOs of companies, social entrepreneurs, they will have the tools to be able to solve education more broadly for the country. With the ultimate aim that if they're able to do that, then every child in this country, irrespective of their geographical location and their socioeconomic background, once they walk into a classroom, they should have the best possible education for themselves. So that is the overview of Lead for Ghana and what it stands for. The Lead for Ghana story, I think the Lead for Ghana story is also a personal story again, because this whole organization was formed because of what I experienced growing up as a child and my life trajectory more broadly. So when I was an undergrad in the US, my best friend, who also happens to be a co-founder of Lead for Ghana, we try to see each other during the summer days, summer vacations, we visit each other and things like that. So there was one time he was doing an internship with a company called Inter in Poughkeepsie, New York. So I went to visit him. And then we're like, you know what? Poughkeepsie is about 2 hours from New York City. The young one, look, let's go into New York City and just go and have fun. let's just go and explore and for the day and then come back. So, well, that's a whole different story for sure. On our way to New York, we were just talking. We were both went to Chimoto School as well, so we were just like kind of reminiscing about our school days back in Chimoto School and how education in America is like. We just being young adults, right? Exploring a different country and living. And then he told me that he's building a library in Kumasi. And I said, what do you mean by building a library? It was like, one of his professors at MIT gave them a topic to write about, what are some of the things they would like to do. So he wrote this essay. And by the way, he writes really well. So he wrote this essay about if he had money and stuff, he would build a library and so forth. So the professor read the essay, was like, oh my God, this is such an amazing thing. And if you really want to build a library, then I will help you build this. He was like, yeah. So the professor connected him to, organization. He raised some money, did a book drive, and I'm listening to him. And I'm like, this guy. His name is Sadiq, by the way. I was looking at him, so Sadiq, you're telling me that you, at this age, you're like, at that time, I think we were like first year in college, like undergrad, like freshman, right? About to get into sophomore year, which is second year in university. And I was thinking, I was like, God, you know what? I've always had this idea of helping people and stuff and changing stuff, but I always thought like I had to finish school, become this rich guy, and then I can build libraries and stuff like that. But to see somebody who was my age, going through my experiences, having the wherewithal to do such a project, to me was quite inspirational to me. So I'm like, okay, cool. So it becomes almost like this. I went back to my university and I went straight to my university president and I said, look, I want to build a library in my home country. He was building, I think his library capacity was 7,000. I want to build a 30,000 book capacity library. So I spoke to him. He told me the organization that he worked with, introduced the organization called Better World Books. So I reached out to Better World Books and they interviewed me. They were like, okay, we can help you raise, put together a book drive and so forth. So then we did a book drive and then I found an organization called Books for Africa and they ship books to Africa. So I contacted them. They were like, it's going to cost about 10,000 USD to ship one container of books to the continent. Of course, I'm in freshman, sophomore year, I'm in second year university. I don't have $10,000 to. So I was like, okay, I need to raise money for this. That's one thing. And then if I was also going to build a library, it's going to cost a lot of money. I knew that. Probably about 250,000 USD, right? But so that second year, I came back home. And anytime I come back home, of course, I would just, engage with my friends just to see where they are, what they are doing. Basically how their life trajectory was moving. I also tend to go back to villages, just talk to individuals. So just living a young man's kind of life. And then I went to the region, which was the Volta region, I think Akachi specific, where I wanted the library to be situated. So I got the opportunity to meet with a member of parliament then. And he told me, okay, he has this education project in mind that he wants to do something for his community. I was like, oh, great. Well, how about we combine forces and build a library and I'll situate the library within this constituency so that the schools around the people, the constituency can really benefit from this. So he was able to then source funding, I think which was about 250,000 USD to put the infrastructure together. And then I went back to Books for Africa, raised 10,000 USD, and then got Better World Books to ship the books to Books for Africa. And then Books for Africa shipped the books to Ghana. And then the library was inaugurated 30,000 book capacity library. Very excited. And this was, and by the time the library was, it took about 2 years. So at that point, I was also just graduating with my undergrad. That experience taught me a few things. One is the fact that if you have a dream and you have a plan, you can literally execute on anything. And to be able to put together almost 300,000 USD and all these organizations to come together to put together a library, that literally increased my confidence level. Right. So the library was there operating over a period of time. And then I started working the pharmaceutical law, and then I came back to Ghana to go and visit the library. When I got there, I was so mad because when I got there, the library was locked. And then the call someone to open the library, we went in there. The books were well arranged. It was most of the people not touching the books. So I asked one of the librarian and the teachers, like, tell me, what is happening here? These people told me that they don't want the children to destroy the books. So they are monitoring it on a very tight schedule. And I'm like, no, this has to be a joke. I went through hell. I went through a lot to make sure that this was there. I don't care if these kids would take the book home and pour palm nut soup on it. I don't mind if they're destroyed. I just want them to be able to read. That is the whole point. But the more I investigated and asked some questions, I came to realize that building libraries across Ghana is not what's going to solve our educational issues. There's much more a systemic issue happening. And if we really wanted to solve this, we have to approach it from a systemic stance. This is not an infrastructure problem. This is a human capacity leadership problem. And we have to address this on a different scale. It has to be on a much higher scale, and it has to be on the systemic development standpoint. But I really didn't know what the solution was going to be and what part. So I kind of tabled that idea for some time. A year later, one of my friends that I went to undergrad with decided to join a program called Teach for America. And when he joined Teach for America, they posted him to Texas. He was always talking about Teach for America. I was like, what is wrong with this? I mean, smart guy, amazing with, arithmetic. He could have worked on Wall Street. He could have worked for any of those big companies, but decided that he was going to go teach for 2 years in one of the hard communities in Texas. So I went to visit him. And then he told me about the concept. His name is Abdul. Abdul told me about the concept of Teach for America. It's like, look, Teach for America is prestigious. And that's what attracted me to Teach for America. But this is what Teach for America does. They recruit the best and brightest university graduates, people from Harvard, Cornell, Yale, Stanford, the top-notch universities, right? They train them, and then they deploy them to go into what they call the ghettos to go and teach. But whilst they're teaching, because they're high-achieving students and high-achieving graduates from top universities, they have high standards for their students to be able to push their students to achieve at a higher grade. But most importantly, after 2 years, they then move to go and work within different sectors, right? So they go to the Ministry of Finance, they go to the White House, they go onto Wall Street, and then they leverage their network to change the school system. So let's say a school needs computer somewhere in Pennsylvania. They have an alumni that works at maybe Comcast or Microsoft, right? So they leverage that alumni to push computers to that particular school because that alumni understands the need of that particular school. So they kind of building the next generation of leaders that are moving into different sectors, but they understand the importance of education and therefore channeling resources into education. Now it's like, bingo, this is it. If there's any continent in the world that needs leadership development at a systemic level where they can leverage on network, it had to be Africa. So at that moment, I just flew back to New York, thought about this for like 3 months. So then I called Sadiq, and then I called Abdul, and then Sadiq also brought in somebody else, this is another guy, and then we had a colleague called Carolina. So then we started having calls like, how do we implement this in Africa? How do we do it in Ghana? Who do we need to talk to? And then they dawned on us that somebody needs to move back home to champion this. Of course, I volunteered myself because I was kind of like spearheading the visionary end of this whole project. So then I went to my boss, I quit my job, and then 2 weeks later, I was on a one-way ticket flight to Ghana to start Teach for Ghana. At that point, it was called Teach for Ghana. Of course, as an African young person, it's very difficult to tell your parents that, look, I'm leaving my lucrative pharmaceutical world job to move back home with no job. You don't know where your source of income is coming from. And then to make it worse, tell them you're about to start a not-for-profit organization, and also within education where people don't really, in the teacher space as well, where people don't really value them much. And I'm glad I have amazing parents, because my mom is like, you know what, if this is what you want to do, then you have our full support. So then I moved to Ghana. I made a list of people that I wanted to reach out to. Nana Jane was the Minister of Education at that time, and then a member of Parliament that I worked with to build a 30,000 book capacity library a couple of years back also became the Speaker of Parliament. Oh. So then I was like, okay, so I mean, this is how you say it. You can only connect the dots when you're looking backwards, right? Like you never know. Yeah. So I put together a roadmap. So first I went to the Speaker of Parliament. First I went to the Ministry of Education to see Nana Jane, and I couldn't see her because the people there thought I was, and at this point I was like 27 years old. So I think some of the probably thought, who is this small guy who thinks they can just come to the country and fancy them? Like, are you crazy? So they tell me I was, so no problem. So then I went to the Speaker of Parliament and I said, look, this is my idea. This is what I want to do. And I literally needed to open doors. And because I had worked with him before and in building that book, I feel like he knew, like, when Daniel says he's going to do this, I mean, he's really, really serious about it. He knew I was not, this was not some flimsy. So then he called the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Education, introduced me to him and said, look, whatever this young man wants, just help him out. So then he took me back to the Ministry of Education to go and see the minister. And then you had that conversation, told him about, teach for Ghana points. And then I got introduced to some regional directors, went back to the Volta region, spoke to the regional director of education for the Volta region. I sold this idea to him. It's like, look, this is brilliant. This is something I want in the region. Then I went to other corporations. I went to MTN, spoke to their board members. They thought I was crazy because they were like, there's no way you can recruit smart young people who have second-class, upper first-class graduates to go and teach in rural communities. It's not going to happen. So basically, whatever my proposal was, they said no problem. But we found a way of raising money. So then Teach for Ghana started in the Volta region in 2016. We placed our first cohort of fellows, about, I think, 30 of them, in the Volta region in 15 schools. And within those 2 years, we completely changed the educational trajectory in those 15 schools. And this is where that story came of the schools that we are in, and every student got into secondary school and so forth. So we know, okay, we had something that really, really, really works. So between 2016 all the way down to 2017, 2018, we decided to shift our name because people thought we were a teacher training organization, which we weren't. And because young people don't like to go into teaching, it was kind of affecting our recruitment in terms of the kind of caliber of people we were recruiting into the program. So then we rebranded to Lead for Ghana. Because we wanted people to truly understand this is the leadership development organization. We are not asking you to be teachers forever. We just want you to get into the educational system, understand the educational system, and then you can go and become the doctor you want to be, or the parliamentarian you want to be, or the economist that you want to be. So that's where the shift in branding came in from Teach for Ghana to become Lead for Ghana, and the rest is history.
It's truly a remarkable story. I was just smiling from ear to ear, seeing how everything was just connecting, and it looked like when you had the idea, it's interesting when you came back to Ghana, you just went straight high level, it was just straight to the people at the top.
The reason I also had to go very high level quickly is I believe in failing fast, right?
Right.
I mean, it's first of all, I'm taking a huge risk.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm leaving. The risk was high. I'm leaving a certain lifestyle behind, and I'm also leaving a certain career behind. And by leaving that career, I'm also putting a lifelong goal, which was building that pharmaceutical company on hold. So if this was not going to work, I needed to find out immediately. I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to wait to find out later on down the line that you spent a decade of your life doing this. It didn't span out. So my point was, look, and if this is also going to be a systemic changing thing, I needed individuals that would open doors for me. But the other thing I also noticed was, in our context, we have ageism, which ageism is because you were young, by default, it means you don't have experience to make systemic change. And I think that alone is an issue that we need to address as a country, because I haven't told you about the barriers I've gone through, because I went through some major barriers, not because the idea was not a great idea. It was just the fact that I was young.
We don't talk about that enough. We genuinely do not talk about that topic of ageism enough. I think it's that cultural thing where, children are supposed to keep quiet when adults are talking. And so they sort of put children in a certain box to where you have to get old before you can start doing certain things. And you get out of the continent and you realize you are meeting people who are in charge of huge portfolios in different sectors, and they are so young. Yep. And you're wondering, wow, what have I been doing with my life? Follow-up question to this: what are some of the real hard issues that you're dealing with?
I think ageism is one, which is one of the things that I have kind of just recently alluded to. The other one is also mindset. Shifting mindset is quite tough, especially in the industrial context that we are operating in. And also, I think it goes back to the example I shared about some parents not wanting to take their kids to school because they've lost faith in the educational system. And to shift that mindset, it takes time. It doesn't take one conversation that, education is important, so therefore take your kids to school. You have to demonstrate success to them. You have to demonstrate success over a period of time for them to be able to buy into that success story and then ultimately shift their mindset. So it's a slow process, but I think we're getting there. The more successes we chalk, the more mindsets we're able to shift, the more people are beginning to take. So for instance, the communities that we are in, right now, I think they're in 9 regions, and probably by the end of this year, we'll be in all 16 regions in Ghana. But Volta region being the region that we started with, you can tell that the communities that we live in, those communities, their perception of bioeducation has shifted. Right? They've shifted in such a way that we go into communities that we don't have Lead for Ghana fellows in those communities, and the communities reach out to us, literally begging us to Lead for Ghana fellows. Oh, wow. The chiefs in the communities that we are in kind of share the soil to the other chiefs in other communities. So you can tell that they've seen something really positive and something very transformational, and they want that for their communities as well. And to stay on that story, someone called me this one major philanthropist called me one day, and he was like, are you the CEO of Lead for Ghana? I was like, yes. I was like, what did you do to my people in my village? They've been making so much noise about you people. I want to see you for myself. So I was confused, right? So I was like, so what's the name of your village? He told me. So then I reached out to my programs lead and I told him, like, do you have a fellow? Just like, yeah, we have a few fellows in that particular community. Long story short, he was just incredibly amazing. He ended up actually sponsoring about 30 fellows to move into a different community just because of the success story that he had. And so I think changing perception has been a huge thing in the beginning, but I think, again, as we chalk more successes, that helps out a lot. The third bit is fundraising. Look, if you don't have money, your idea is dead. It's on the table. Money moves everything. So you have to find a way of raising money. Whether it is you're building a revenue-generating social enterprise that is feeding the organization, or you're building a formidable fundraising team. But you yourself, no one can sell the vision of an organization better than you. So it's just money, raising money, finding the resources, push your idea forward. And it's been quite challenging. Raising funds within our context quite challenging, because when this started, my whole mantra was, let's make sure this is grassroots, funding coming from Ghana for Ghanaians and stuff like that. But our corporates don't really understand what CSR is, and most individuals also don't really understand what philanthropy is. And most of the time, the not-for-profit organizations in our countries are also not well set up to be able to receive the level of funding they need to be successful. The fundraising was a huge thing, but I think we're quite creative about how to raise funds and how to just keep making sure that we have the resources to run the organization. There's sometimes that it becomes quite difficult to find the right level of resources, but you can't give up, right? You just can't. You just have to keep moving, keep knocking on doors, keep being creative, keep being innovative, so you can have the resources you need to move the needle forward for you. The third challenge, which I would say is a good challenge, is, we have a lot of kids who want us to be in the classroom, and it's amazing. And we have young people that want to join Lead for Ghana and move into these communities to make tremendous change. So to me, that makes me really happy that we don't have to really struggle much to get 4,000 people to register their interest in joining Lead for Ghana, or getting 2,000 or 1,000 applications at a time. That is good for us. We just need to solve that second problem, which is making sure you have the multiple, sources of funding to be able to make sure you're bringing in more fellows and moving into more schools. more broadly. Beyond that, the other things are just bureaucracy, and that would take a long time to solve. Like, you can go to a meeting and the meeting supposed to start at 11:30 and the meeting ends at 12:15. It's just disrespectful. But because you kind of have to talk to that individual to be able to get what you need to move the organization forward, you're kind of forced to deal with a system like that. And I think that's just a behavioral thing that needs to shift. And the last point to make with that, I think if we can build a country where people are on time, I think 50% of our problems will be solved. I genuinely believe that. If we can just build a very strong time management culture in this country, a lot of our problems will be solved.
So I hear ageism, I hear the mentality bits, I hear the funding. There's the bureaucracy bits. To wrap up, right? Give advice. I want you to give some key, about 3, 4, maybe 5 key, some sort of advice to potential individuals or corporate entities that might be looking to positively contribute and impact education.
Yeah, I think the first point I want to say, which is my advice to the general public and to the youth of Ghana, I want to specifically to the age bracket between 25 and 35, that whatever you can do, wherever you are, to make sure that the generation coming after you is having the best possible education. Let's do it. And you can start by just visiting a classroom. It doesn't matter. Find a school in your community and go and spend 30 minutes in the classroom. That's it. Ask permission from the head teacher. Just stay in the classroom for 30 minutes. Ask the school what they need and help them out. It could be books that they need. It could be a small bag. Whatever it is you can do to help the schools in your community, just do it. You can start right from there. To the corporate world, I think my advice to them is to take social responsibility meaningfully. I think a lot of them look at it from a standpoint of it's a donation. It's not. It's a brand and a reputation thing. If you want to build a good reputation for your corporation, you need to leave the communities you're in better than you found them. It doesn't make sense to move into a community that is desolate with bad educational system. You don't do anything about it, and all you do is you just siphon money out. That doesn't help anybody. So you need to look at it from a perspective of this is a human capacity development. Because if those communities are doing well, by default, you do well because it gives them disposable income to be able to purchase the products that you are selling to them, but it also provides you with security and also good reputation for your company. So it doesn't have to be lead forgotten, but find organizations out there that are doing amazing things in your community and really back them up. The third bit goes to the government. I think the government should really focus on finding startup organizations and try and scale them up. When I say scale them, I don't mean the government taking a program from them and trying to run it themselves. Invest in those young companies and scale their solution. So their solutions can reach more people, can reach more communities, can reach more children, more broadly. The last bit goes to young people in Ghana. Like, whether we like it or not, we are literally in control of this country. Power belongs to young people in this country. We are more than 60% of the population. We decide who's going to be president. We decide everything. So knowing that we have that power, let's channel this power into the right spaces. Go out there and start that business that you've always wanted to start. Go out there and build that organization that you've always wanted to build. Don't be afraid. And most importantly, do it in collective. Find other people that are within the space that you want to operate in and operate with them in those spaces. And don't be afraid to fail. Just learn from it and move forward. That's it.
Daniel Dotse, co-founder of Lead for Ghana. Thank you so much for this riveting, insightful, inspirational discussion. I am truly grateful for the time you've given us today. Thank you for the insights that you've shared.
Thank you too. Thank you, Kwame. Thanks for the opportunity.